My sister didn't wait for the dirt to settle on our father's grave before she decided to bury me. 2. Standing near the reception buffet, Kendra leaned in and hissed that I was a leech, pitching her voice perfectly so our cousins could hear every syllable, while I was still trying to process the numbness of losing him. She was already rewriting history, painting me as the failure who only showed up when the checkbook finally opened. The road back to Briar Glen was exactly as I remembered it. A winding ribbon of asphalt cutting through woods that were just beginning to surrender their autumn color to the gray skeletal grip of November. I gripped the steering wheel of my rental car until my knuckles turned white. 33 years old. I was 33 years old, and driving back to my childhood home felt less like a homecoming and more like a regression. I was returning to bury my father, Martin Cook, but underneath the crushing weight of that reality was the smaller, sharper needle of my own insecurity. I felt like a child who had failed to launch, coming home with empty pockets and a hollow chest while my older sister, Kendra, undoubtedly already had the funeral flowers color-coordinated and the obituary proofread for grammar. Grief is a strange mechanic. It dismantles you, but not cleanly. It leaves you feeling stripped of your armor while simultaneously weighing you down with lead. I parked in the driveway of the house I grew up in, staring at the white siding that looked a shade grayer under the overcast sky. I had not been here in 6 months. Dad had died of a massive heart attack on a Tuesday while buying coffee. Just like that. No lingering goodbye. No bedside reconciliations. Just a phone call from the hospital. And then the silence. I walked inside. The house smelled of lemon polish and old paper. It was quiet. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. I set my bag down in the hallway. I expected to see him in his armchair. I expected the smell of his pipe tobacco. Instead, I smelled nothing but the aggressive cleanliness of a space that had been scrubbed. The funeral was 2 days later. The church was full, which was a testament to the man my father was, or at least the man Briar Glen thought he was. He had built Cookridge Packaging from a 2-man operation into a regional powerhouse, and half the town owed their mortgages to his payroll. I sat in the front pew, staring at the mahogany casket, feeling a detachment that terrified me. I wanted to weep. I wanted to wail, but I just felt cold. Beside me, Kendra sat with a posture so rigid she looked like a statue carved from marble. Her husband, Vaughn, sat on her other side, checking his phone in his lap every 3 minutes. After the service, we moved to the reception hall. It was a sea of black wool coats and murmured condolences. I stood near the buffet table, holding a cup of lukewarm coffee that tasted like burnt plastic, trying to make myself invisible. I did not want to talk about him. I did not want to hear people say he was in a better place. He was in the ground. That did not feel like a better place to me. Kendra found me. Of course she found me. She approached with that gliding walk she had perfected, the one that made her look like she was floating above the messiness of human emotion. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than my car. Tailored to within an inch of its life, her eyes were dry. "You look tired." "Naomi," she said. It was not a question. "I am tired. Kendra, we just buried Dad." She stepped closer, invading my personal space. The air around her smelled of expensive vanilla perfume. She lowered her voice, but she did not whisper. It was a stage whisper, projected with the precision of a theater actor. "You look like a mess, but I suppose that is consistent." I took a breath. I was not going to do this. Not today. Please, Kendra, not here. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. Her eyes were hard. Flat surfaces. "Why not here? This is a family gathering, and we need to be clear about where the family stands. I saw you talking to Cousin Miller. I saw you looking at the house. Do not think I do not know what you are doing." I stared at her. "I have no idea what you are talking about. I'm just trying to get through the day." She leaned in until her lips were inches from my ear. The venom in her voice was so concentrated, it felt like a physical burn. "You are a leech. Naomi." I froze. The room seemed to tilt. The hum of conversation around us dipped, just for a second. But it was enough. I saw Cousin Miller turn his head. I saw Mrs. Gable, the organist, glance over her spectacles. Kendra had timed it perfectly. "You never helped him," she hissed, loud enough to carry. "You stayed away for years, playing artist in the city, calling only when you needed rent money, and now you show up with your sad eyes, waiting for a payout." I felt the blood drain from my face. That was not true. I had never asked Dad for rent money, not once. I struggled. Yes, I worked 2 jobs to support my graphic design career. Yes, but I had never taken a dime since I left college, and I called him every Sunday, every single Sunday. "That is a lie," I said, my voice trembling. "Is it?" Kendra straightened up, smoothing the front of her dress. "Everyone here knows it. Naomi, everyone knows who was here taking care of him and who was off finding herself. The estate is for the responsible one. It was meant to maintain the legacy, not to bail out a failure." She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving me standing there with my cold coffee, while half the room pretended they had not just watched my sister eviscerate me. I felt a hand on my elbow. I flinched, turning to see Vaughn. He offered me a tight, sympathetic smile that looked practiced in a mirror. "She is just upset," Vaughn said. His voice was smooth, like oiled gravel. "Grief hits everyone differently. She called me a leech." "Vaughn," in front of the entire town. Vaughn sighed, looking around the room as if checking for spies. "Look, Naomi, we just want to manage expectations. The inheritance is basically settled. Martin had things structured very specifically. We are just trying to protect you from disappointment." Disappointment. He patted my arm. It felt condescending. "You should take something sentimental. A keepsake. The old clock in the hallway. Maybe. Or some of his books. Take what you can carry and go back to your life. There is no need for you to get bogged down in the legal mess. It is better if you just disappear back to the city before things get complicated." He squeezed my arm, a fraction too hard, and then moved away to shake hands with the mayor. I stood there, shaking. It was not just grief anymore, it was a siege. The next morning, the summons came. It was not a request. It was a voicemail from a man named Malcolm Wren, representing the Calder and Wren fiduciary group. The message was brief, polite, and completely devoid of warmth. Attendance was mandatory. I drove to their offices in the center of town. Briar Glen had one brick building that qualified as a business center, and Calder and Wren occupied the entire top floor. The reception area was hushed and expensive, decorated in mute grays and blues. I was led into a conference room with a long oval table that reflected the overhead lights like a frozen lake. Kendra and Vaughn were already there. Kendra refused to look at me. Vaughn gave me a nod. Sitting at the head of the table was Malcolm Wren. He was a man who looked like he had been born in a suit. He was thin, with silver hair combed back severely and wire-rimmed glasses that magnified his eyes. He did not stand when I entered. He simply gestured to a chair. "Ms. Cook, thank you for being punctual." I sat down. The leather chair was cold. "We are here to discuss the preliminary timeline for the reading of the Martin Cook Trust." Malcolm said. His voice was dry, like shifting sand. Kendra leaned forward. "Malcolm, we already know the broad strokes. Can we not just expedite the filing? Vaughn and I have spoken to Northline Legal." And they said. Malcolm Wren did not raise his voice, but he stopped talking, which somehow silenced Kendra effectively. He looked down at his wrist. He wore a vintage mechanical watch, silver with a black face. He stared at it for a full 3 seconds before looking back up at Kendra. "Mrs. Hale, the trust is a legal instrument with specific procedural requirements. There is no expediting. The formal reading is mandatory. It is scheduled for exactly 7 days from today, at 9 in the morning. 7 days?" Kendra snapped. "That is ridiculous. We have business decisions to make regarding the company. We cannot be in limbo for a week." Malcolm looked at his watch again. He did not look at the time. He looked at the second hand sweeping around. It was a deliberate, almost theatrical gesture. "The schedule is the schedule," he said. "The trust explicitly states that a cooling-off period of 7 days must pass after the funeral, Before the reading can commence, your father was quite specific. Vaughn cleared his throat. Surely, as the executor, you have some discretion. I am the trustee. Mr. Hale, not the executor. The distinction is vital. And no, I have no discretion regarding the timing, Kendra huffed, crossing her arms. This is a waste of time. Dad would not have wanted this. When she said that when she invoked what Dad would have wanted, Malcolm Wren's eyes flicked to his watch again. I watched him. It was a tic, a nervous habit. This man did not look nervous. He looked like a machine. He was tracking something. Every time Kendra mentioned contesting the timeline or forcing an early release, his eyes dropped to that watch face. I spoke up for the first time. Is there anything we need to prepare? Malcolm turned his gaze to me. It was blank, unreadable. You must simply be present. 9 a.m. Do not be late. The doors to the conference room will be locked at 9:01. He stood up, signaling the meeting was over. As we filed out, I felt a strange vibration in the air. Kendra and Vaughn were annoyed, treating this as bureaucratic incompetence, but I felt something else. I felt like I had walked into a trap that had not yet sprung. I returned to Dad's house. I had decided to stay there rather than a hotel, mostly to save money, but also because I needed to be close to him, or the memory of him, but the house was becoming hostile. I walked into the kitchen to make tea. I opened the junk drawer where Dad kept his odds and ends batteries, rubber bands, takeout menus. It was empty. Completely empty. I stared at the clean wood of the drawer bottom. I opened the next drawer. Empty. I went to the study. His desk was clear. The stacks of paper that usually cluttered the surface were gone. The filing cabinet was locked. I tried to open the closet in the hallway where he kept his winter coats and boxes of old photos. The coats were there, spaced out perfectly on hangers. The boxes were gone. Paranoia pricked at the back of my neck. Someone had been here. Someone had gone through everything. I told myself it was grief. I told myself maybe Dad had cleaned up before he died. Maybe he knew. But Dad was a pack rat. He never threw anything away. He kept receipts from 1995. I went back to the kitchen, my heart hammering a chaotic rhythm against my ribs. I needed to find something that proved he had been here. I reached up to the high cabinet above the refrigerator, the one place nobody ever looked because it was too hard to reach. I dragged a chair over and climbed up, way in the back, behind a dusty fondue pot that had not been used since the 80s. My fingers brushed against paper. I pulled it out. It was a sealed envelope, heavy, cream-colored stock. On the front, in Dad's handwriting shaky, but unmistakable, it read, Naomi, if you are reading this alone, it has already started. My breath caught in my throat. I climbed down from the chair, clutching the envelope like it was a live grenade. I sat at the kitchen table. I went to tear it open, but then I stopped. Stamped in the bottom corner of the envelope, in embossed blue ink, was a logo, Calder and Wren Fiduciary Group. This was not just a letter from my father. This was legal correspondence, or at least, it had passed through Malcolm Wren's hands. Why was it hidden above the fridge if Malcolm gave it to him? Why hide it? Or did Malcolm hide it? I hesitated. If I opened this, did it trigger something? Was I supposed to wait? The warning on the front, if you are reading this alone, sent a chill through me. I was alone. I was very alone. The doorbell rang. I jumped, nearly knocking my tea mug off the table. I shoved the envelope into the pocket of my cardigan and went to the door. It was Kendra. She stood on the porch, wrapped in a cashmere coat, holding a bottle of wine. She looked less aggressive than she had at the funeral, but the sharpness was still there, lurking under the surface. "Can we talk?" she asked. Like adults. I stepped back to let her in. I did not want to, but she was my sister, and part of me, the part that was 5 years old and worshipped her, still wanted her approval. We sat in the living room. She poured the wine. She did not ask if I wanted a glass. She just poured it. "Look, Naomi," she started, swirling the red liquid. "I was harsh yesterday, at the funeral. I apologize. The stress has been unmanageable." "Thank you," I said, guarding myself. "But," she continued, not missing a beat, "we need to be realistic. Vaughn and I have been looking at the estate complexity. The company is in a delicate transition period. Dad left things. Messy. Messy how leveraged. Complicated. If we go through a protracted probate process, the company could suffer, the stock value could tank, people could lose their jobs. Dad would not want that. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a blue folder. She slid it across the coffee table toward me. Vaughn had the lawyers draw this up. It is an agreement, a settlement. I looked at the folder. I did not touch it. What does it say? She took a sip of wine. It says that you agree to waive your claim to the trust in exchange for a direct cash payout. From us. Personally, I frowned. Why would you do that? We do not even know what is in the trust yet. We have a general idea, she said quickly. Too quickly. And we know that liquidating assets to pay you out later would damage the company. This way, you get cash now, immediate, clean. You can go back to the city, pay off your debts, maybe buy a condo, start fresh. How much I asked. She named a figure. It was $50,000. To me, right then, $50,000 was a lot of money. It was life-changing money. It would pay off my student loans. It would give me a cushion I had never had. But it felt wrong. It felt like a bribe. And if I sign this, I said, I walk away. I have no part in the decision-making. You do not want that burden. Naomi, you are an artist. You are not a business person. You do not understand corporate governance or charitable foundations. You would be miserable. This is mercy. Naomi, I am trying to save you from drowning in paperwork and legal fees. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the tension in her jaw. I saw the way her fingers gripped the stem of the wine glass so hard, her knuckles were white. She was terrified. Why was she terrified if I was just a leech? If I was just a nuisance, why offer me $50,000 of her own money before the will was even read? I thought about the empty drawers. I thought about the reset house. I thought about Malcolm Wren checking his watch. No, I said. The word hung in the air. I surprised myself. It was a small word, but it felt heavy. Excuse me, Kendra said, her smile faltering. I said no. I am not signing anything. Not until the reading. Not until I hear what Dad actually said. Kendra set her glass down. The glass made a sharp clack against the coaster. Don't be stupid. Naomi, this is a generous offer. If you wait, you might get nothing. The trust might be structured to lock everything up for years. You could be fighting us for a decade and end up bankrupt. Then I will take that risk. Kendra stood up. The mask slipped completely. The sophisticated, grieving daughter vanished, and the bully from our childhood returned. Her face twisted into a sneer. You are making a mistake. A massive mistake. I stood up too. My legs were shaking, but I locked my knees. It is 7 days. Kendra, you can wait 7 days. She laughed. A harsh, barking sound. You think you are standing on principle? You are standing on quicksand if you do not cooperate. Naomi, if you make this difficult, people will learn. They will learn what Dad really thought of you. We will make sure every mistake you ever made, every disappointment you ever caused him, is public record. We will humiliate you. Naomi, you will not just be the poor sister, you will be the pariah. She grabbed her coat. Think about it. You have 24 hours to change your mind. After that, the offer is off the table. She stormed out. The front door slammed, shaking the frame. I sank back onto the sofa, my heart racing like a trapped bird. The silence rushed back in, heavier than before. The threat hung there. People will learn what Dad really thought of you. Did he hate me? Was that it? Was the trust going to be a final list of my failures? I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope. The paper felt warm from my body heat. If you are reading this alone, it has already started. It had started. Kendra was scared. Vaughn was lying. The house had been purged. I tore the envelope open. My hands were shaking so bad I almost ripped the letter inside. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was not a letter. It was not a confession. It was not a list of my failures. It was one sentence, typed in the center of the page. Watch the trustees watch at 9:17. I stared at the words. Watch the watch. 9:17. The reading was scheduled for 9 in the morning. 9:17 was 17 minutes in. I looked at the clock on the wall. The second hand ticked loudly in the quiet house. Tick, tick, tick. I did not know what was going to happen in 7 days. I did not know what game my father was playing, but as I sat there in the dark, clutching that cryptic note, one thing became crystal clear. Kendra was right about one thing. I was not a business person, but I was his daughter. And for the first time in my life, I was not going to be the one who looked away. I was going to watch. I was going to watch everything. Sleep did not come easily that night. When it finally did, it was shallow and populated by the ghosts of conversations I had never actually heard, but could now vividly imagine. I woke up at 4 in the morning, the darkness of my father's house pressing against my chest like a physical weight. I lay there in the twin bed of my old room, staring at the ceiling where glow-in-the-dark stars from 1998 still clung faintly, their light almost extinguished. Kendra's voice was stuck in a loop in my head. "You are a leech. You never helped him." Was she right? The accusation had found the crack in my armor, the deep-seated insecurity that I was the disappointment of the family. I had left Briar Glen. I had pursued a career in graphic design that paid bills but never accrued wealth. I drove a 10-year-old car. I rented an apartment. By the metrics of Cookridge Packaging and the Country Club set, I was a non-entity, but I replayed the last 5 years in my mind, searching for the negligence she claimed defined me. I remembered the Sunday calls, every week, like clockwork. I would sit on my fire escape in the city, phone pressed to my ear, listening to Dad talk about the weather, or the supply chain issues with cardboard pulp, or the way the hydrangeas were taking over the front walk. He never sounded angry. He never sounded disappointed. He sounded lonely. "How is the art? Kiddo," he would ask. "Are you eating enough?" "I am fine." "Dad," I would say, "how is Kendra?" And the line would go quiet for a beat. "She is busy," he would say, "very busy. The company takes a lot out of her." If I was the leech, why was I the one who knew the name of his favorite diner waitress? Why was I the one he told about the ache in his left knee? That he hid from his doctor, Kendra's narrative was seamless, polished, and loud. But as the sun began to bleed gray light through my window, I started to wonder if it was a rewrite, a story she had told herself so many times she believed it, or a story she needed everyone else to believe to cover up the silence on her end of the line. I got up, brewed a pot of coffee that was strong enough to strip paint, and made a plan. I could not sit here and wait for the clock to tick down to 9:17 on the day of the reading. I needed to understand the board I was playing on. My first stop was Arthur Henderson's office. Arthur had been Dad's personal attorney for 30 years. He was the one who drafted the original will, the one who handled the deed when Dad bought the lake house, the one who sent me a crisp $50 bill in a card every time I graduated from anything. If anyone knew why Malcolm Wren was suddenly the gatekeeper of my life, it would be Arthur. I drove into town, parking in front of the old brownstone on Elm Street where Arthur had practiced since the 80s. But when I walked up the steps, the brass plaque that used to read Henderson and Associates was gone. In its place was a sleek, brushed steel sign, Northline Legal Partners. I pushed open the door. The smell of old books and pipe smoke was gone, replaced by the scent of ozone and aggressive air conditioning. The receptionist was young, wearing a headset, sitting behind a desk that looked like a slab of white marble. "Can I help you?" she asked, not looking up from her screen. "I am looking for Arthur Henderson." I said, "I am Naomi Cook, Martin Cook's daughter." She stopped typing and looked up. Her expression shifted from boredom to a practiced, professional mask. "Mr. Henderson retired last October. Ms. Cook retired." I blinked. He never mentioned that. He was working on my father's estate. The firm was acquired by Northline Legal Partners shortly before his retirement. She said smoothly, "All active files were transferred to our senior partners." "Okay, then I would like to speak to whoever is handling the Martin Cook file." She did not even check her computer. I'm afraid that is not possible. Ms. Cook, the Martin Cook estate is currently under the exclusive administration of the appointed trustee, Calder and Wren. All inquiries must be directed to Mr. Wren's office. We are not authorized to discuss the details with beneficiaries outside of the formal proceedings. But you are the legal counsel. I insisted, leaning against the cold marble. You wrote the will. We are the custodians of the record, she corrected. The trustee is the executing authority. Would you like Mr. Wren's card? I already have his card. I want to talk to someone who actually knew my father. She smiled, and it was the same tight, dismissive smile Vaughn had given me at the funeral. I am sorry. Ms. Cook, that is the protocol. I walked out of the office feeling like I had walked into a glass wall, retired abruptly, sold the practice. Arthur Henderson loved the law. He used to say he would die at his desk. For him to sell out to a firm that looked like an Apple Store showroom felt wrong, and Northline Legal Partners. Where had I heard that name, Kendra? At the meeting with Malcolm. Vaughn and I have spoken to Northline Legal. My stomach twisted. My sister and her husband were already talking to the firm that had swallowed my father's lawyer. They were inside the fortress. I was standing in the parking lot. I needed coffee. Real coffee. Not the sludge I had made at home. I walked down the block to the Roasted Bean, a place Dad and I used to go for breakfast on Saturdays. As I waited in line, a man in a gray windbreaker tapped me on the shoulder. Naomi Cook. I turned. He looked familiar, thinning hair. Kind eyes. Hands rough from work. It took me a second. Mr. Gorski, I asked. He nodded, looking relieved that I remembered him. Frank Gorski. I worked the floor at Cookridge for 20 years. Shift supervisor. Oh, right. It is good to see you. Frank? He shifted his weight, looking at his feet and then back at me. I was real sorry to hear about Martin. He was a good man, hard, sometimes exacting, but fair. We do not get many bosses like him anymore. Thank you. Frank, that means a lot. He hesitated, looking around the coffee shop as if he was about to say something illicit. Listen, Naomi, I know this is not the time or the place, and you are grieving, but there is a lot of worry down at the plant. Worry about what? About the changes. And, well, folks are wondering if the foundation is going to still exist now. The foundation, I asked? Yeah, the Larkhaven Renewal Fund. I stared at him. The name meant nothing to me. What is that? Frank looked surprised. You do not know. Your dad started it, maybe 5. 6 years ago. It is not big, but it helps folks in town. It paid for the new roof on my mom's house after the storm last year, when the insurance denied the claim. It bought the equipment for the high school robotics team. My father did that. He never put his name on it, Frank said, lowering his voice. He called it Larkhaven because that was the street he grew up on. But we knew it was him. The checks always came through a trust account. But Martin approved them personally. We are worried Kendra is going to shut it down. She never liked the local spend. I felt a sudden stinging behind my eyes. I did not know. Frank? I honestly did not know. He nodded, looking sympathetic. Well, if you have any say in it, tell them it matters. It matters a lot. I walked back to my car with my coffee untouched. A secret foundation. A charitable fund tied to housing repairs and community grants. Dad had never mentioned it. Not once in our Sunday calls. Why was he humble? Or was he hiding it from someone? She never liked the local spend. I drove back to the house with a new purpose. I went straight to the study. If the files were gone, the mail might not be. I dug through the recycling bin in the garage, a blue plastic tub filled with junk mail and catalogs that had piled up in the weeks before he died. I found it near the bottom, a heavy envelope from a bank, addressed to the Larkhaven Renewal Fund, care of Martin Cook. I tore it open. It was a bank statement. The balance was not millions, but it was substantial, several $100,000. But what caught my eye were the withdrawals. Repair vendor A, community grant B, emergency housing assistance. And then, A letter clipped to the back, a thank you note, handwritten on lined paper. Dear Mr. Cook, thank you for the furnace. I was scared to sleep at night because of the cold. You saved my winter. God bless. I sat on the cold concrete floor of the garage and cried. Not for the money, but for the fact that I had let Kendra convince me that my father was a cold, distant titan of industry who only cared about legacy. He was buying furnaces for strangers. He was fixing roofs. He was doing it quietly, while Kendra and Vaughn were driving luxury cars and complaining about his local spend. The sound of a car in the driveway snapped me out of it. I shoved the bank statement into my purse and wiped my face. I walked out to the front porch, just as Kendra was getting out of her Range Rover. She was carrying a wooden box. It looked like mahogany. She walked up the steps, her face arranged in an expression of tragic sisterhood. I brought you something, she said softly. I did not move from the doorway. What is it? She held the box out. I went through some of Dad's things at his condo in the city. I thought you should have these. A memory box. I took the box. It was heavy. I carried it into the living room and set it on the coffee table. Kendra sat down, watching me with hawk-like intensity. I opened the lid. Inside, nestled in black velvet, were a collection of items that felt like they had been selected by a museum curator who had never met the subject. A gold watch I had never seen him wear. A framed photograph of the two of us at my high school graduation, a photo where I had braces and frizzy hair. And he looked stiff. A silver pen set. It was all valuable. It was all impersonal. Thank you, I said, my voice flat. I know you do not have much from him, Kendra said, crossing her legs. I wanted you to have some keepsakes, things that show his success. I poked through the items. I was looking for something specific, something that smelled like him. Where is the notebook, I asked. Kendra blinked. What notebook? The black one. The moleskin. He carried it in his shirt pocket every day of his life. It had the elastic band snapped around it. He wrote everything in it. Garden measurements, grocery lists, ideas for the packaging designs. Kendra waved a hand dismissively. Oh, that ratty old thing, I threw it out. My head snapped up. You threw it out. It was trash. Naomi. It was falling apart. It was full of scribbles. It was embarrassing. We are trying to preserve his dignity, not hoard his garbage. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes were wide, too wide. Her breathing was shallow. He had that notebook on him when he died. I said, the hospital gave us his personal effects in a bag. I saw the bag. Kendra. I saw the wallet. I saw the keys. I did not see the notebook. I told you, she said, her voice sharpening. It was trash. I disposed of it. Why are you obsessing over a piece of stationery when I just gave you a solid gold Rolex? Because the Rolex tells me nothing, I snapped. The notebook was his mind. Kendra. It was him. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. You always romanticized him. You want him to be some poetic philosopher. He was a businessman. Naomi, he dealt in facts and figures. That notebook was just clutter. She was lying. I could feel it radiating off her like heat. She was not just annoyed. She was afraid. She had destroyed or hidden the one thing that might contain his unfiltered thoughts. I stood up too. Thank you for the box. Kendra, it is very curated. She narrowed her eyes. You are being ungrateful. Again, I am being observant. There is a difference. She left in a huff, leaving the expensive box of meaningless treasures on the table, as soon as her car disappeared down the driveway. I pulled out my phone. I dialed the number on the business card I had been given. Calder and Wren Fiduciary Group. It rang twice. Mr. Wren speaking. His voice was dry, precise. Mr. Wren, this is Naomi Cook. Ms. Cook, good afternoon. I did not bother with pleasantries. I have a question about the envelope. There was a silence on the line. It lasted long enough for me to wonder if the call had dropped. Which envelope would that be? Ms. Cook. You know which one. The one in the kitchen. The one with your logo on the seal. Another pause. Longer this time. I opened it. I said, it said to watch your watch at 9:17. I waited for him to deny it. I waited for him to tell me I was hallucinating, or that my father was playing a prank. Instead, Malcolm Wren said, "Please arrive at 8:45 in the morning. The schedule is important." "That is it," I asked. "That is all you are going to say? I am the trustee." "Ms. Cook, I follow instructions. 8:45. Do not be late." The line clicked dead. I stared at the phone. No reassurance. No denial. Just a confirmation that the game was real, and the players were taking their positions. I needed to get out of the house. The silence was suffocating me. I drove into town again, aimless, just needing to see moving cars and living people. I ended up at the bookstore cafe on the corner of Main and First. I bought a tea and sat in the back corner, trying to read a magazine, but the words swam before my eyes. Well, look who it is. I looked up. Vaughn Hale was standing over my table, holding a latte. He was wearing a cashmere sweater tied around his shoulders, looking every inch the country club scion. "Vaughn," I said, guarding my tea like it was evidence. "Mind if I sit?" He did not wait for an answer. He pulled out the chair opposite me and sat down, flashing that easy politician smile. "Kendra tells me you two had a little tiff earlier." She threw out Dad's notebook. I said. Vaughn sighed, shaking his head. "She is trying to clean up." "Naomi, you have to understand, for Kendra, order is a coping mechanism. She sees clutter and she sees chaos. She did not mean to hurt your feelings." He took a sip of his latte. "Look, I want to be the reasonable mediator here. I know you and Kendra have always had friction, but we really do want what is best for you. Then tell me why you are pressuring me to sign a settlement before the reading." Vaughn leaned in, lowering his voice, because the trust can freeze for years. "Naomi, literally years. If we go into a contested probate, or if the distribution terms are complex, the assets get locked. You could be staring at a legal battle that drains the entire estate before you see a dime. We are offering you a lifeboat." He sounded sincere. He really did. But then he checked his phone, glancing at a notification. "We just want to get this wrapped up before the quarter closes," he muttered, almost to himself, tapping out a quick reply. "It just makes everything cleaner for the taxes." I froze. "Before the quarter closes, Vaughn," I said slowly, "we are burying a father, not filing a corporate tax return. Why does the fiscal quarter matter for a family trust?" His eyes snapped up to mine. For a split second, the smooth veneer cracked. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. "It is just accounting," he stammered. "Estate taxes. You know how the IRS is. Deadlines." He stood up abruptly. "Anyway, think about the offer. 50,000 is nothing to sneeze at. We are just trying to help." He walked away fast, leaving his half-finished latte on the table. I sat there, my heart thumping. Before the quarter closes. That was corporate speak. That was earnings report language. I opened my laptop. I connected to the cafe's Wi-Fi. I went to the Secretary of State's Business Registry website. I typed in Cookridge Packaging. The results populated. Active, good standing. But then I looked at the recent filings. 3 months ago, restructuring of debt obligations. 2 months ago, amendment to board governance expansion of voting shares. 1 month ago, pending merger inquiry redacted. I did not understand all the legal jargon, but I understood enough. Cookridge Packaging was not just a stable family business. It was moving, it was changing, and it looked like it was in debt. Restructuring. That usually meant trouble. That usually meant the bank was calling the shots. If the company was in trouble, or if Vaughn and Kendra were trying to sell it, or merge it, they would need control of the shares. And if Dad's shares were locked in a trust, they needed me to sign away my claim so they could bypass the trust restrictions. They needed to own the estate to save the deal. That was why the quarter closing mattered. It was not about taxes. It was about a deadline for a bank or a buyer. I closed my laptop. I was in over my head. I was a graphic designer who knew about kerning and color theory, not corporate rating. I was playing poker with people who owned the casino. I needed an expert. I searched for financial forensics on my phone. I scrolled past the big firms, the ones that looked like Northline Legal, I wanted someone hungry, someone who looked for the cracks. I found a website for Eden Marlowe Advisory. The landing page was stark black and white. The tagline read, "We follow the money when it does not want to be found." I dialed the number. Eden Marlowe. A voice answered. It was a woman's voice. Smoky, direct, no receptionist. "Hi, my name is Naomi Cook. I think I am being scammed by my own family, and I have exactly 1 hour of money to pay you for a consult." There was a pause, then, the sound of a chair shifting. "Start talking." "Naomi." I told her everything. The Leech comment, the reset house, the trustee's watch, the hidden envelope, the foundation, the missing notebook, and finally, Vaughn's slip about the quarter closing. When I finished, there was silence on the line for a long moment. "You are right to be paranoid," Eden said. Her voice was crisp now, professional but engaged. "What does it mean?" I asked. "It means the house is burning, and they are trying to get you to sell your insurance policy for pennies before you smell the smoke." She said, "So what do I do?" "Do I sign the deal? Absolutely not." Eden said, "If someone is pressuring you to sign fast, it is usually because time is the lever. They are on a clock. You are not. But the trustee, Malcolm Wren, he is on a clock too. He keeps checking his watch." "That is different," Eden said. "A trustee watching the clock is following a script. A beneficiary watching the clock is running out of options. Your brother-in-law is running out of options." She paused. "Listen to me. Naomi, do not sign. Do not agree to anything. Go to that reading, watch the watch, and record everything. Because if they are desperate enough to offer you 50 grand before the body is cold, they are hiding something worth 50 million. I hung up the phone. My hand was trembling. But not from grief this time. From adrenaline. I looked out the window of the cafe. Briar Glen looked the same as it always did, sleepy. Gray, harmless, but beneath the surface, gears were grinding. My father had set a machine in motion, and he had left me the only key I needed. If I was brave enough to use it, watch the watch, I would be there, and I would be ready. The morning of the trust reading broke with a sky the color of a bruised plum. Rain threatened, but never fell, hanging in the air as a mist that coated the windshield of my rental car. I sat in the parking lot of Calder and Wren for 10 minutes, watching the wiper blades of a passing delivery truck, trying to slow my heart rate. It was 8:30 in the morning. I was 15 minutes early, per Malcolm Wren's cryptic instruction. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror. I wore a charcoal blazer I had bought for a client pitch 3 years ago, and a white blouse that I had ironed twice. I looked professional. I looked capable. I did not look like a leech. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of old car upholstery and anxiety, and stepped out. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent. When the doors slid open, the reception area was already occupied. Kendra and Vaughn were there. Seated on a low leather sofa, flanking 2 men I did not recognize, the men were dressed in suits that cost more than my entire year's rent. They had the sharp, predatory grooming of shark's hair gelled into submission, ties knotted with mathematical precision, briefcases that looked like they contained nuclear codes. These were the Northline legal partners. Kendra looked up as I entered. She did not say hello. She just stared at me with a look of icy appraisal, as if checking for cracks. "You are early," Vaughn said, checking his watch. His voice was too loud in the quiet room. "I was told to be," I said simply. One of the attorneys stood up. He was tall, with a jawline that could cut glass. "Ms. Cook, I am Davis Thorne, senior partner at Northline. We are representing the interests of Mrs. Hale and the Cookridge corporate entity in these proceedings." I shook his hand. It was dry and firm. "I am representing myself." Thorne's eyebrows lifted a fraction of an inch. "A brave choice. Estate law can be nuanced." I let go of his hand. "I am sure it is." The heavy oak doors to the conference room opened, and Malcolm Wren appeared. He looked exactly as he had the week before, same gray suit, same wire-rimmed glasses, same unreadable expression. "Please, come in," Malcolm said. We filed in. The conference room was vast, dominated by a long mahogany table that smelled of lemon oil. Kendra and Vaughn sat on one side, flanked by their attorneys. I sat on the opposite side, alone. Malcolm took his seat at the head of the table. In front of him was a single, thick folder. The label was typed in stark black letters, Cook Family Trust Procedural Sequence. He placed his hands on the table, palms down. He looked at me. Then, with a deliberate, slow movement, he turned his wrist and checked his watch. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 8:45 exactly. "Thank you all for being punctual," Malcolm said. His voice was level, devoid of any inflection. "Before we begin, I must remind you that this meeting is being recorded for legal verification. Both audio and video are active." He pointed to a small black dome in the center of the ceiling. Kendra shifted in her seat. "Is that necessary? This is a private family matter. It is a requirement of the trust instrument," Malcolm replied. "Your father insisted on transparency." Vaughn cleared his throat. "Of course, we have nothing to hide." Malcolm opened the folder. He did not look at the papers immediately. He looked at his watch again. "The reading will commence at 9 o'clock sharp. Until then, we will review the identification protocols and the waiver of conflict forms." The next 15 minutes were a blur of legalese. I signed a paper confirming I was Naomi Cook. I signed a paper confirming I had not been coerced into attending. The Northline attorneys scrutinized every document like they were looking for invisible ink. At 8:59, the room fell silent. I looked at my hands. They were clasped tightly in my lap. I forced myself to relax them. Watch the watch. The note had said, 9:17. That was 18 minutes away. At 9 o'clock exactly. Malcolm cleared his throat. "We are here to execute the instructions of the Martin Cook Revocable Living Trust. I am Malcolm Wren, serving as the successor trustee." He began to read. It was standard boilerplate at first definitions of the estate. The naming of beneficiaries, the revocation of prior wills. It was dry, boring, and rhythmic. Then, he got to the section on asset valuation. The estate includes the primary residence at 12 Oak Lane, the vacation property at Lake Mirror, liquid cash assets held in accounts at First National, and the controlling interest in Cookridge Packaging, consisting of 51% of the voting shares. Kendra interrupted. "Correction. Mr. Wren, the voting shares are subject to the spousal transfer agreement Mom signed before she died. They should not be part of the general trust pool." Malcolm stopped reading. He looked up. He did not look at Kendra. He looked at his watch. "The trust document accounts for the spousal transfer. Mrs. Hale, your mother's shares reverted to your father upon her death. They are part of this estate." Kendra's eyes narrowed. "That is a matter of interpretation. We have a letter of intent that suggests otherwise." Mr. Thorne, the attorney, leaned forward. "We will be filing a motion to sever the corporate shares from the personal estate. Mr. Wren, we believe commingling them endangers the company's operational stability." Malcolm listened. He did not argue. He just looked at the second hand sweeping around the face of his watch. "Your objection is noted for the record," Malcolm said. He continued reading. "The distribution of personal effects shall be at the discretion of the trustee, with the intent of equitable division based on sentimental value and historical attachment." Kendra scoffed. A sharp, ugly sound. "Equitable," she said. "That is a joke. Naomi hasn't set foot in that house in years. She does not know the history of a single item in it." I kept my eyes on Malcolm. He was looking at his watch again. "Mrs. Hale, please," Malcolm said mildly. "No, I will not say please," Kendra snapped. Her voice was rising, echoing off the hard surfaces of the room. "We need to be realistic here. Naomi contributed nothing to the maintenance of that house. She contributed nothing to Dad's care. She was gone. She was invisible. And now she expects to walk in here and claim half the furniture." I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her about the hours I spent on the phone with him, listening to him cry about Mom. I wanted to tell her about the times I offered to come home and he told me no. "Stay there. Build your life." Do not get stuck here like I did. But I bit my tongue. I remembered Eden Marlowe's warning. Time is the lever. And I remembered the recording device on the ceiling. Kendra was baiting me. She wanted me to explode. She wanted a recording of Naomi Cook, the unstable, emotional artist, screaming at her grieving sister. If I looked unstable, they could argue I was unfit to manage any assets. They could petition to have me removed as a beneficiary for my own protection. I took a deep breath through my nose. I stared at the wood grain of the table. Mr. Wren, I said, keeping my voice soft and steady. Please continue. Kendra glared at me. Oh, look at her. Playing the saint. You are here for the check. Naomi, just admit it. You want a token payout so you can go back to your little apartment and pretend you are an artist. Mr. Thorne placed a hand on Kendra's arm, but he did not stop her. He was watching me too, waiting for the crack. Malcolm looked at his watch. It was 9:12. The trust stipulates, Malcolm read, ignoring Kendra, that the beneficiaries shall receive an initial distribution of funds to cover immediate expenses, subject to the conditions of the governance clause. Governance clause, Vaughn piped up. What governance clause? We were told this was a standard distribution trust. It is a complex instrument, Malcolm said. Kendra slammed her hand on the table. This is stalling. You are stalling. Malcolm, we know Dad wasn't in his right mind at the end. We know he was confused. If there are weird clauses in there, it is because someone manipulated him. She shot a look at me. Did you get to him? Naomi, did you cry on the phone and tell him how broke you were? Did you guilt him into rewriting things? I felt my fingernails digging into my palms. The accusation was so vile, so backward. I remained silent. I looked at the clock on the wall. 9:14. Malcolm looked at his watch. Mrs. Hale, I must ask you to refrain from speculative outbursts. I am not speculating, Kendra shouted. I am stating facts. My sister is a financial drain on this family. She has always been a drain. She is a leech, and we will not let her drain the company dry just because she failed at her own life. The room vibrated with her anger. It was performative, yes, but there was real venom there too. She hated me. She really, truly hated me. I looked at Malcolm. He was not looking at Kendra. He was staring at his wrist. 9:15. Mr. Wren, Thorne said smoothly, stepping into the silence. My client is understandably upset. The ambiguity of this proceeding is causing undue distress. We move that we skip to the final distribution schedule immediately. We will follow the procedural sequence, Malcolm said. He turned a page. He read a paragraph about tax liabilities. He read a paragraph about the maintenance of the cemetery plot. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. 9:16. Malcolm stopped reading mid-sentence. He closed the folder. The room went dead silent. Mr. Wren Vaughn asked. Malcolm held up a hand. One moment. He sat there, perfectly still. He was looking at his watch. The second hand was ticking. Tick, tick, tick. I watched him. Kendra watched him. Confused. The lawyers looked annoyed. 30 seconds passed. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. What are we waiting for? Kendra hissed. Malcolm did not answer. He watched the second hand cross the 12. A soft electronic beep sounded from his wrist. It was 9:17. Malcolm reached into his briefcase, which sat on the floor beside him. He pulled out a second packet. This one was sealed in a heavy, silver mylar envelope. It looked like something used to transport evidence. On the front, in red ink, it was stamped, Conditional Addendum Time Release. He placed it on the table. He took a small key from his vest pocket and used it to slice open the seal. What is that? Thorne asked, his voice losing its smooth polish. We were not informed of any addendums. This addendum, Malcolm said, his voice changing, becoming harder, more authoritative, activates only if the reading reaches this timestamp without a prior agreement being signed by all parties. He pulled out a document. It was bound in blue paper. Since no settlement was reached prior to 9/17, the conditional terms of the Martin Cook Trust are now in effect. He opened the document. The trust is divided into two distinct tracks. Malcolm read, Track A is the asset distribution. Track B is the governance and oversight protocol. He looked up at us. Regarding Track B, the trust appoints a temporary co-protector to oversee the transition of the corporate shares and the charitable foundation for a period of 30 days. This co-protector shall have full access to all financial records, vendor contracts, and internal communications of Cookridge Packaging and the Larkhaven Renewal Fund. He paused. The appointed co-protector is Naomi Cook. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. Then, the explosion. What Kendra shrieked. She stood up, her chair screeching backward against the floor. That is a joke. That is a sick joke. She cannot run a company. She cannot even run a checking account. She is not running the company, Malcolm corrected calmly. She is overseeing the transition. She has veto power over any major financial decisions during the audit window. Vaughn stood up too, his face pale. This is absurd. Naomi has no experience. This endangers the business. We will sue. We will file an immediate injunction. Mr. Thorne was already typing furiously on his phone. Mr. Wren, this appointment is clearly the result of undue influence. Martin Cook was not competent to make this decision. We will contest this immediately. Malcolm looked at the lawyers. The trust anticipated a claim of undue influence. He said, he reached for a remote control on the table, and it includes a built-in verification step. A screen descended from the ceiling at the far end of the room. The lights dimmed automatically. Kendra was shaking. Turn it off. I do not want to see this. Sit down. Mrs. Hale, Malcolm said. It was not a request. The screen flickered to life. It was Dad. He was sitting in his study, the study I remembered, before it was cleaned out. He was wearing his favorite beige cardigan. He looked tired, older than I remembered, but his eyes were clear, sharp. He looked into the camera. Hello, everyone, Martin said from the screen. His voice filled the room, familiar and warm, and it felt like a ghost had just walked through the wall. I felt tears prick my eyes instantly. If you are watching this, it means things did not go smoothly. He said. He sighed, rubbing his face with a hand that trembled slightly. I hoped they would. I hoped you two would figure it out. But I am a realist. He leaned forward. I love you both. Kendra, Naomi, you are my daughters. But love does not mean blindness. On the screen. He picked up a piece of paper and set it down. Kendra, he said, looking directly at the lens, you are brilliant. You are capable. But for the last 2 years, you have been governing by fear. You have been telling me that the sky is falling, that the company is in danger, that I need to sign things I do not understand to save us. Kendra made a noise in her throat, a strangled sob or a gasp of rage. I may be old, Martin said, but I am not stupid. I know when I am being handled, and I know that you are not doing it alone. He glanced off camera. As if looking at someone standing in the shadows, I designed this trust to stop the pattern. He said, I cannot give you the company if you are going to strip it for parts. I cannot give you the money if it is going to destroy what we built. So, I am putting a pause on it. A test. The video. Martin looked down for a moment, gathering himself. Then he looked up again. His eyes seemed to lock onto mine. Naomi, he said. I held my breath. I know you feel left behind. He said, I know you think I didn't care about your art or your life in the city. I know Kendra told you I was disappointed. He shook his head. That was a lie. Kiddo, I was never disappointed. I was proud. You were the only one brave enough to leave. You were the only one who didn't need my money to define who you were. Tears rolled down my face, hot and fast. But if this has become a fight, Martin said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious, it means you were lied to too. It means they told you you were worthless, so you would stay out of the way. He pointed a finger at the camera. Do not stay out of the way. Naomi, stand up. Look at the books. Ask the questions. If everything is clean, then the 30 days will pass, and everyone gets their share. But if it is not clean, He leaned back. Then you do what you have to do. The screen went black. The lights in the room hummed back on. For a long moment, nobody moved. The echo of his voice still hung in the air. You were the only one brave enough to leave. Kendra was staring at the blank screen, her mouth slightly open. She looked struck, not angry anymore, but stunned, like she had been slapped. Vaughn was staring at the table, his face a mask of calculated panic. Malcolm Wren closed the blue folder. As per the instructions you just heard, he said, his voice breaking the spell. The audit window begins immediately. He looked at the lawyers. This means all trust assets are frozen. No withdrawals, no transfers, no corporate dividends. The accounts are locked until the co-protector signs off on the audit completion. Frozen Vaughn choked out. You cannot freeze the operating accounts. We have payroll. We have vendors. Operational expenses will be approved on a case-by-case basis by Ms. Cook, Malcolm said. But no capital can leave the ecosystem. He stood up. This meeting is adjourned. Ms. Cook, please remain behind to sign the acceptance of the co-protector role. Kendra stood up slowly. She looked at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but the shock was hardening back into hate. She walked around the table until she was standing right behind my chair. She leaned down. You have no idea what you just did, she whispered. Her voice was trembling. I turned to look at her. I wiped the tears from my face. I think I do. Kendra, I think I just stood up. She shook her head. No, you just lit a fuse. She straightened up and looked at Vaughn. Let's go. She walked to the door. Vaughn scrambled to follow her, the lawyers packing their briefcases with frantic efficiency. At the door, Kendra turned back one last time. She did not look at Malcolm. She looked straight at me. You just cost me everything, she hissed. And then she was gone. I sat there in the silence of the conference room. My hands were still shaking, but the feeling in my chest was new. It wasn't grief. It wasn't shame. It was power, and it terrified me. Malcolm Wren sat back down. He looked at me, and for the first time since I had met him, the corner of his mouth twitched upward, a microscopic smile. He tapped the blue folder. Your father bet on the right horse, Ms. Cook, he said. He pushed the papers toward me. Now, we have a lot of work to do. I looked at the folder. Track B governance and oversight. I picked up the pen. I thought about the $50,000 they had offered me. I thought about the Leech comment. I thought about the reset house. I signed my name, Naomi Cook. I was not going back to the city. Not yet. I had a job to do. The drive back to the house felt different. The gray sky didn't feel oppressive anymore. It felt like a blank canvas. I called Eden Marlowe from the car. It happened. I said, Tell me. She said, 9:17. The watch beeped. I am the co-protector. Assets are frozen for 30 days. There was a low whistle on the other end of the line. Co-protector. Eden mused. That is a heavy crown. Naomi, it means you are not just a beneficiary. You are the police. I know. They are going to come for me. Aren't they? Oh, they are going to come for you with everything they have, Eden said cheerfully. Legally, emotionally, socially, you just stop the money. People kill for less than that. What do I do first? First, you get the documents. Eden said, every bank statement, every ledger, every vendor contract for the last 5 years. You get them before they can shred them. I can do that. Malcolm said I have access. Good. And Naomi? Yeah, get a locksmith. Change the locks on that house today. Why? Because your sister just told you that you cost her everything. And people who have lost everything do not respect boundaries. I hung up. I pulled into the driveway of my father's house. It looked the same, but it felt different. It was not a shrine to a dead man anymore. It was a fortress, and I was the guard. I walked inside and locked the door behind me. I went to the kitchen and looked at the empty drawer where the envelope had been. If this has become a fight, it means you were lied to too. I went to the living room and looked at the memory box Kendra had given me. The Rolex, the pen, the photo. I picked up the photo. Me and Dad. I looked at his face. He looked stiff. Yes, but looking closer, I saw his hand on my shoulder. He was gripping it tight, like he was holding on to me. You were the only one brave enough to leave. I set the photo down. I am back. Dad, I whispered to the empty room, and I am not leaving until I find out what they did to you. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is a mistake. Fix it before it gets worse. I stared at the screen. Vaughn Kendra. One of the lawyers. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot and sent it to Eden. Then I went to the study. I sat in his chair. It smelled of him, leather and tobacco. I opened the laptop I had brought with me. I created a new folder on the desktop. I named it The Audit. I was ready, or at least, I had to be, because the clock was ticking again. 30 days. 30 days to uncover the truth. 30 days to survive my family. I looked at my own watch. It was 2:00 in the afternoon. Day 1 had begun. The dining room table in my father's house had become a command center. Stacks of paper covered the mahogany surface where we used to eat Thanksgiving dinners, transforming the space into a landscape of black ink and red flags. My role as co-protector sounded grand in the conference room, but in practice, it felt like being a forensic accountant with a hangover. I had access, but it was access through a straw. The trust portal gave me view-only rights to the last 5 years of financial statements for both the personal estate and the corporate intersection points. I spent the first 3 days just staring at rows of numbers, feeling the familiar imposter syndrome creeping up my spine. I was a graphic designer. I knew how to balance a composition, not a ledger, but I had Eden Marlowe. We spoke every evening at 6:00. She was the voice of God coming through my laptop speakers, guiding me through the digital maze. Look at the vendor payments. Naomi, Eden said on the 4th night. Her video feed was off, leaving just her smoky voice filling the room. Ignore the payroll. Ignore the utilities. Look for the invoices that are just under the threshold for board approval. What is the threshold, I asked, scrolling through a spreadsheet from last year. Usually $50,000, she said. Look for 49,000. Look for 48.5. I filtered the list. My eyes scanned the columns. Here, I said, Greenleaf Logistics, $48,000, paid monthly for the last 8 months. Click on the invoice. Eden commanded. What were they shipping? I opened the PDF. It was a generic invoice. No itemized list. Just consulting services and logistical support. Consulting is the favorite hiding place for ghosts, Eden said dryly. Do you see any others? I kept scrolling. Apex Solutions, North Harbor Management, Vantage Point Strategy. They all followed the same pattern. Payments ranging from $40,000 to $49,000, all for vague services like strategic oversight or efficiency audits. And they all started 18 months ago. That is a lot of consulting, I murmured. It is a hemorrhage, Eden corrected. Someone is siphoning cash out of the operating budget. And because it is under the $50,000 mark, it does not trigger an automatic vote by the full board. It only requires executive sign-off. Who signs off? The CEO, Eden said, or the CFO, or a designated proxy. Who is running the company right now? Technically, there is an interim leadership team, I said, but Kendra and Vaughn have been acting as the de facto head since Dad got sick. There is your leak, Eden said. And here's the kicker. Naomi, if those payments stop because you froze the accounts, those shell companies are going to get hungry, and whoever is behind them is going to panic. The panic was already visible. It wasn't just about the cash flow. It was about the power structure. I spent the next morning reading the corporate bylaws, a document so dry it made dust look exciting, and realized why Vaughn had been so terrified about the quarter close. The Martin Cook Trust held 51% of the voting shares of Cookridge Packaging. As long as the trust was in audit mode, those shares were effectively abstaining. They could not vote. If there was a merger on the table, or a loan refinancing that required a shareholder majority, it was dead in the water until I signed off. The company was paralyzed. And in the corporate world, paralysis is death. Vaughn wasn't just worried about taxes. He was worried about a deal falling apart. A deal he had likely promised someone he could deliver. The blowback began not in the boardroom, but on my phone. It started with a text from Cousin Miller. Naomi, I heard about what happened at the reading. I know you are hurting, but holding the family hostage isn't the way to handle grief. Let it go. Then came Aunt Linda. Your father worked too hard for you to destroy his legacy out of spite. Please, honey, sign the papers. Kendra had launched a campaign. She was smart enough not to attack me publicly with legal threats that could be reposted. Instead, she went for the social kill. She was painting a masterpiece of a narrative where I was the unstable, estranged daughter lashing out because I felt unloved. While she was the weary, responsible steward trying to save the Titanic, I opened Instagram against my better judgment. Kendra had posted a photo of her and Dad from 5 years ago. They were at a gala. He looked regal. She looked adoring. The caption read, "Missing you today. Dad, it breaks my heart to see your life's work threatened by selfishness. Some people wait for death to cash in, but I promise I will fight to protect what you built. #legacy, #family first." She didn't name me. She didn't have to. The comments were a chorus of sympathy. Stay strong. Kendra. Sad that grief brings out the worst in people. Ignoring the haters is hard when they are related to you. I felt a hot, sick lump form in my throat. Emotionally exploited Dad. That was the subtext. She was implying that my sudden involvement was a temper tantrum. I wanted to reply. I wanted to post the video of Dad saying, "You were the only one brave enough to leave." I wanted to burn her down. Don't. Eden texted me, as if she could read my mind. Do not engage. If you argue in the mud, you just look dirty. Stay clean. Focus on the documents. I put the phone away. I needed to move. I needed to do something physical that wasn't scrolling through spreadsheets or reading hate mail from my own blood. I needed to find the notebook. I drove to the trustee's office. I didn't make an appointment. I just walked in. The receptionist looked startled, but she buzzed me through. Malcolm Wren was standing by the window in his conference room, looking out at the rainy street. He turned when I entered. He didn't look surprised. "Ms. Cook," he said, "to what do I owe the pleasure I want the notebook added to the asset list?" I said, dropping my bag on the table. Malcolm blinked slowly. "Which notebook?" "The black moleskin. The one missing from the memory box. The one Vaughn implied he had read. It is estate property. If it was in the house when Dad died, it belongs to the trust. I want it cataloged, and I want it recovered." Malcolm walked over to the table and sat down. He opened his folder, the same one from the reading. He flipped through a few pages. "Ms. Cook, the notebook is already on the asset list." I froze. "What item number 402? Malcolm read, "Personal journal. Moleskin. Black. Contents. Personal notes and diagrams." I stared at him. "If it is on the list, where is it?" "It was not in the box Kendra gave me. It is not in the house." Malcolm looked up over his glasses. "It is listed as checked out for review." "Checked out by whom?" He turned the page. "By the executor of the personal estate. For the purpose of archiving, Kendra." I said, "The record shows the custody was transferred on the day after the death." Malcolm said, "So she has it. She lied to me. She told me she threw it in the trash." Malcolm's face remained impassive. "If the item is listed as retained asset, and the custodian claims it was destroyed, that is a breach of fiduciary duty. Destruction of estate property is a felony. Ms. Cook." I realized then that Malcolm was giving me a weapon. He wasn't going to fight the battle for me. He was the neutral referee, but he was pointing out where the other side had left their flank exposed. "But," I said, thinking fast, "if she claims she destroyed it, it is her word against the inventory list. She can just say it was a clerical error." "She signed for it," Malcolm said softly. He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a photocopy of a chain of custody form. Item 402. Received by Vaughn Hale. I looked at the signature. It wasn't Kendra. It was Vaughn. "Vaughn signed for it," I asked. "On behalf of his wife," Malcolm said. "But his signature is the one on the line." I took a picture of the document with my phone. "Thank you." "Malcolm?" He nodded once. "You have 25 days left. Ms. Cook, use them wisely." I left the office with my heart hammering. Vaughn had the notebook, or at least, he was the one legally on the hook for it. Kendra had told me she threw it out, but Vaughn had signed a legal document saying he was archiving it. They were uncoordinated. They were lying to me, but they were also clearly lying to each other, or at least failing to get their stories straight. I needed to understand what they were protecting. I knew about the repetitive vendor payments now, but that was just theft. That was simple greed. Dad's video had hinted at something bigger, a private loan arrangement. I needed to go to the source. Cookridge Packaging headquarters was a sprawling complex on the edge of town, a mix of old brick manufacturing plants and a modern glass-fronted administration building. I hadn't been there in 10 years. I swiped my driver's license at the security desk. The guard looked at his screen, frowned, made a phone call, and then finally printed me a visitor badge. I'm just here to collect some personal items from my father's office. I told him. He nodded, but he watched me walk to the elevators like I was carrying a bomb. The executive floor was quiet. People moved with hushed urgency. When I walked down the hallway toward Dad's old corner office, heads turned, whispers followed in my wake. That's her. That's the sister. I reached the office. The door was open. Inside, a woman was packing books into a box. She looked up as I entered. She was in her 50s, with steel gray hair cut in a sharp bob and glasses hanging on a chain around her neck. She wore a suit that meant business. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I am Naomi Cook." She stopped packing. She took the glasses from around her neck and put them on, peering at me. "I know who you are," she said. "I am Talia Brenner, CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, the person who signed the checks, the person who would know about Greenleaf Logistics." I felt a spike of adrenaline. "Ms. Brenner, I am here to—" "I know why you are here," she interrupted. "You are the co-protector. You froze my accounts on Tuesday. I braced myself for a fight. I had to do it. I said, the trust instructions were clear." Talia looked at me for a long moment. Then, she walked over to the door and closed it. She turned the lock. She walked back to the desk and sat on the edge of it. "You have a lot of your father in your face," she said quietly, around the eyes. I stayed silent. "Do you think I am angry about the freeze?" she asked. "Aren't you—" "It paralyzed the company." She let out a short, dry laugh. "Paralyzed Naomi. This company has been sleepwalking toward a cliff for 2 years. The freeze is the first time anyone has hit the brakes." I stared at her. You agree with the audit." Talia crossed her arms. "I was Martin's CFO for 15 years. I helped him build the pension fund. I helped him navigate the recession. I watched him fight to keep jobs here when the consultants told him to move manufacturing overseas." She looked at the empty chair behind the desk. "When he got sick, things changed. Kendra and Vaughn stepped in. They brought in their own advisors, Northline. They started talking about efficiency and leverage. Leverage for what I asked, to secure a private loan," Talia said, "a massive infusion of cash from a private equity group. They said it was to modernize the plant, to expand. But the terms," Talia said, her voice dropping. "The terms were predatory. They required putting up the company's real estate assets as collateral, the land, the buildings, even the intellectual property. And if they defaulted, then the equity group strips it all," Talia said. "They sell the land to developers. They sell the patents to competitors. And they liquidate the pension fund. The company ceases to exist. It becomes a carcass." I felt cold. That was what Dad had feared. A private loan arrangement that could destroy it. "Why didn't you stop them?" I asked. "I tried," Talia said. "I refused to sign off on the valuation. But Vaughn, he found workarounds. He started moving money through vendor contracts to show artificial growth, to make the books look better for the lenders. Greenleaf Logistics," I said. Talia's eyes widened slightly. "You found them. I found the payments. I did not know what they were for." "They are fluff," Talia said. "Fake revenue cycles. They pay out for consulting. The money comes back in as sales from shell entities. It is fraud. Naomi, it is sophisticated, but it is fraud. And if the loan goes through, and the bank finds out, we all go to prison." She took a deep breath. "Your father knew. He found out about 3 months before he died. He was devastated. He wanted to fire them both. But he knew if he did it publicly, the scandal would kill the stock price. The company would collapse anyway. So he created the trust. I realized he created a dead man's switch," Talia said. "He knew Vaughn was rushing to close the loan before the end of the fiscal year. He knew they needed his voting shares to finalize the collateral agreement, so he locked the shares." She looked at me with intensity. "He wanted you protected from the story Kendra tells, Naomi, but more importantly, he wanted the company protected from Kendra. He set up the Larkhaven Renewal Fund as a public good anchor. The foundation," I said, "yes. The foundation owns the land the factory sits on." "Did you know that?" I shook my head. "No. Martin transferred the deed to the foundation 5 years ago." Talia explained, "It was his failsafe. Even if the company is sold, the land cannot be developed for commercial condos. It has to be used for community benefit or industrial employment. He zoned it to save the jobs." I whispered, "Exactly. And Kendra hates it. She wants to dissolve the foundation so she can include the land value in the collateral package. That is why she calls you a leech, because as long as you and that foundation exist, she cannot sell the farm." The weight of it hit me. Dad hadn't just been hiding money in a charity. He had been building a fortress to protect 500 families in Briar Glen from his own daughter's ambition, and he had handed me the keys without telling me what they opened. "Thank you, Talia," I said. She stood up and went back to her box of books. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "The freeze is only 30 days. If you do not prove the fraud by then, the audit ends, the shares unlock, and they will vote you out. They will close the loan." She handed me a small USB drive she had pulled from her pocket. "This is the real general ledger," she said. "Not the one on the portal. This shows where the money from Apex Solutions actually went." I took the drive. It felt hot in my hand. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because I'm retiring," Talia said. "Today is my last day. They fired me this morning for obstructing the transition." She looked at me with a sad smile. "Finish it, Naomi, for him." I walked out of the building feeling like I was carrying a grenade. I had the proof. Talia had given me the map. I sat in my car in the parking lot and plugged the USB drive into my laptop. I sent the files to Eden immediately. Within 10 minutes, my phone rang. "Naomi," Eden said. Her voice was tight. "You see it?" I asked. "I see it. Apex Solutions isn't just a shell. It is a funnel. Where does the money go?" "It goes to a holding company called VH Holdings Limited. Registered in the Caymans. VH," I repeated. "Vaughn Hale. And from there," Eden continued, "it goes to—" "Oh, wow. What gambling debts?" "Naomi, massive ones. Sports betting syndicates in London and Las Vegas." I stared at the dashboard. Vaughn wasn't trying to expand the company. He wasn't even trying to get rich. He was trying to cover a hole so deep he was willing to mortgage an entire town to fill it. "Kendra," I whispered. "Does she know?" Eden asked. "I don't know, but I have to find out." I drove home. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the road. My phone buzzed again. An email notification. Subject: formal notice of legal action. I opened it. It was from Northline Legal Partners. "Dear Ms. Cook, please be advised that we are filing a petition with the probate court to remove you as co-protector on the grounds of incompetence and malicious obstruction of rightful heirs. Furthermore, we are seeking damages for the reputational harm caused to the Cookridge brand. They were escalating. They were going to sue me into oblivion. But they didn't know I had the USB drive. They didn't know I knew about the gambling." I walked into the house. It was dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the living room, watching the headlights of passing cars sweep across the ceiling. I needed to talk to Kendra. Alone. Without Vaughn. Without the lawyers. I texted her. "I know about VH Holdings. I know where the money went. Come to the house. Alone. Or I send the file to the police tonight." It was a bluff. I needed Eden to verify everything before we went to the authorities. But I needed Kendra to panic. 20 minutes later. Headlights swept the driveway. I opened the door. Kendra was standing there. She looked wrecked. Her perfect hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She wasn't wearing makeup. She looked 10 years older than she had at the funeral. She stormed past me into the living room. "You are bluffing," she spat. "You don't know anything." I closed the door and locked it. "I know about the gambling." "Kendra." She froze. Her back was to me. Her shoulders went rigid. I walked around to face her. "I know Vaughn owes millions. I know he has been using the vendor payments to service the interest. I know the private loan isn't for the company. It is to bail him out before the bookies break his legs." Kendra stared at me. Her mouth opened, then closed. "He told me it was an investment," she whispered. Her voice was shaking. "He told me it was a bad real estate deal, that he just needed time to turn it around. He lied to you. Kendra, he is stripping Dad's company to pay for his addiction." Kendra sank onto the sofa. She put her face in her hands. She didn't cry. She just shook. "I signed everything," she said, her voice muffled. "He brought me papers. He said they were standard. Spousal consent, board resolutions. I just signed them. I thought he was handling the stress for me." She looked up at me. Her eyes were terrified. I confronted him. She said, "After the reading, when you froze the accounts, he went crazy. Naomi, he punched a hole in the wall. He said—" She stopped. "What did he say?" I asked gently. "He said if the money doesn't move by Friday, they are going to come for us. Not the lawyers, the people he owes." I felt a chill go down my spine. This wasn't just white-collar crime anymore. This was dangerous. "Did you know?" I asked. "Did you know about the extent of it?" She shook her head. "I knew we were tight on cash. I knew we were living above our means. But I didn't know about the gambling. I swear." She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see the perfect older sister. "I saw a woman who was drowning. That is why I called you a leech," she whispered. "Because I needed the money. I needed it so bad. And you were just there, blocking it. I thought if I shamed you, you would just go away." She reached out and grabbed my hand. Her grip was desperate, cold. "You don't understand what he will do if this freezes. Naomi, he is cornered. He isn't Vaughn anymore. He is something else." I looked at her hand gripping mine. The sister who had humiliated me at the funeral. The sister who had tried to buy me off for 50 grand. I didn't forgive her. Not yet. But I understood her. She wasn't the monster. She was the shield. And now, the shield was cracking. "We have to stop him." I said, "We can't." She sobbed. "He has the notebook. The notebook." I repeated, "The one he signed for. He keeps it in a safe." Kendra said, "In his office at the house. He said it is his insurance policy." "Insurance against what?" "Against me," she said, "and against you. He said if we ever try to cross him, he will release what is in there. He said Dad wrote things, terrible things, about everyone. I remembered Dad's video. If this has become a fight, it means you were lied to too." "Kendra," I said, "do you trust me?" She looked at me. A lifetime of rivalry hung between us. "I don't have a choice," she said. "Then go home," I said. "Act normal. Tell him I am breaking. Tell him I am scared of the lawsuit. Tell him I might sign on Friday." "Why?" "Because we need to buy time," I said. "I need 48 hours to finish the audit. And I need to get that notebook back." How I looked at the chain of custody photo on my phone. "Because he stole it," I said, "and I am going to steal it back." The revelation that Kendra was not the architect of this disaster, but merely another casualty of it, shifted the ground beneath my feet. For 33 years, I had viewed my sister through the lens of our childhood dynamic. She was the golden child, the achiever, the one who fit the mold my father had cast. I was the rebel, the artist, the disappointment. But as I sat in the dim light of the living room, replaying her terrified confession about the private loans and the gambling, I realized I had been playing a game of checkers while Vaughn Hale was playing three-dimensional chess. Kendra's cruelty at the funeral, her demands for the inheritance, her public branding of me as a leech. It was all performance art. It was the desperate thrashing of a woman who was drowning and trying to stand on my shoulders to keep her head above water. I did not forgive her for the pain she had caused me. The humiliation still stung like a fresh slap, but I stopped trying to win the argument against her. I stopped trying to prove I was the better daughter. I needed to see the whole board, and the board was rigged. Malcolm Wren summoned me to his office 2 days later. The rain had finally stopped, leaving Briar Glen scrubbed clean and raw under a pale, indifferent sun. When I walked into the conference room, the table was clear except for a single file folder and a pot of tea. "Please, sit," Malcolm said. He did not look at his watch this time. He looked tired. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper than they had been at the reading. I sat. "How is the audit progressing slowly?" Malcolm admitted. He poured tea into 2 china cups. "Your freeze order has caused quite a stir. Mr. Thorne has filed 3 separate motions to have it lifted. He claims you are causing irreparable harm to the corporate reputation. Let him file." I said, taking the cup, "I have found the payments. Malcolm, Greenleaf Logistics, Apex Solutions, I know where the money went." Malcolm held up a hand. "Do not tell me. Not yet." "Why?" "Because I am the trustee," he said. "My role is to execute the instructions of the trust, not to investigate the crime. If you tell me now, I am obligated to record it. If I record it before you have irrefutable proof, Mr. Thorne will use it to claim you are biased and acting on conjecture." He took a sip of tea. "Your father's instructions were precise, Naomi. He knew that once the rock was turned over, the things crawling underneath would bite. Pressure will increase as deadlines approach. I am already feeling the pressure." I said, "Kendra is terrified. Vaughn is cornered." Malcolm nodded. "A cornered animal is dangerous, but a cornered man with debts is lethal. You must be careful. The 30-day window is not just a time limit. It is a pressure cooker. Martin designed it to force a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "The kind that happens when people think they are running out of time." Malcolm said. He slid the folder across the table toward me. "This is the updated procedural schedule. We are approaching the halfway mark. I suggest you ensure your personal security is robust." I looked at him. "Are you threatening me?" "Malcolm, I am warning you. Money changes people. The lack of money changes them faster." I left his office with a chill that the weak sunlight could not touch. I drove back to the house, checking my rearview mirror every few blocks. I felt foolish, like I was living in a paperback thriller. But the memory of Vaughn's bouncing knee and forced smile made my stomach turn. That night, the house felt too big. The silence was not peaceful. It was heavy, filled with the creaks and groans of settling timber that sounded like footsteps. I was in the kitchen, making toast for dinner because I had lost my appetite for anything real. When my phone buzzed on the counter, it was a call from an unknown number. I hesitated. It was 10:30 at night. I swiped answer and held the phone to my ear. I did not say hello. "Stop digging." The voice was male, but it sounded distorted. Not electronic, just muffled, like someone speaking through a thick cloth, or holding the phone away from their mouth. "Take your little share and vanish." "Naomi, go back to the city. Nobody needs to get hurt." The line clicked dead. I stood there, gripping the edge of the granite counter until my fingers went numb. My breath came in shallow, jagged gasps. It was one thing to suspect danger. It was another to have it whispered in your ear in the safety of your own kitchen. My hands shook so badly I dropped the toast. It landed butter side down on the floor. A mundane tragedy that somehow made me want to scream. I picked up the phone again. I saved the voicemail. Then I called Eden Marlowe. "I just got a threat." I said as soon as she picked up, "Play it for me," she commanded. I played the recording. Standard intimidation. Eden said. Her voice was calm, which helped steady my own heart rate. Short sentences, vague consequences. If they were going to hurt you tonight, they would not have called first. They are trying to scare you into quitting. It is working. I whispered, "I am scared." Eden, good. Fear keeps you alert. But do not isolate yourself. Isolation breeds paranoia, and paranoia makes you sloppy. You need a witness. You need someone in that house who is not family and not a lawyer. I thought about my friends in the city. They were graphic designers, baristas, art directors. They would not understand this. They would tell me to call the police and run. I need someone who knows the terrain. I said, I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I had not called in 3 years. Serena Pruitt. We had grown up together. We learned to ride bikes on this street. We smoked our first cigarettes behind the garage. Serena had stayed in Briar Glen, becoming a high school history teacher. She was the most grounded person I knew. I dialed. She answered on the second ring. Naomi. Is everything okay? No, I said, my voice cracking. No, Serena, nothing is okay. Can you come over? Please. She did not ask why. She did not ask for details. She just said, I am putting my shoes on. 20 minutes later, Serena walked through the door carrying a large pizza and a bottle of bourbon. She looked exactly the same messy bun, oversized sweater, eyes that saw everything and judged nothing. She hugged me, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt like I was being held by someone who did not want something from me. I told her everything. I told her about the Leech comment, the trust, the gambling, the threat. We sat on the living room floor, eating cold pizza and drinking bourbon out of mugs. So let me get this straight. Serena said, gesturing with a pepperoni slice, your dad turned his estate into an escape room, and your brother-in-law is a villain from a bad 80s movie. Basically, I said, laughing a wet, shaky laugh. And Kendra is... What the damsel? The accomplice. Kendra is the collateral, I said. She is the one who is going to get crushed when the walls come down. Serena took a sip of bourbon. Well, I always thought Vaughn was a creep. He has that smile. You know the one. The smile that says, I am looking at your chest but pretending to look at your soul. I laughed again. It felt good. It felt human. Thank you for coming. I said, I am staying. Serena announced, I have a break from school this week. I am moving into the guest room. If anyone calls you with a spooky voice again, I am answering the phone. I have a teacher voice. Naomi, I can make a sophomore cry from 50 yards. Let's see how Mr. Unknown Number handles that. With Serena in the house, the shadows retreated a little. I slept for 6 hours, which was a record for the week. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I had not felt since the reading. The fear from the phone call had hardened into resolve. Stop digging, the voice had said, which meant I was close to something they did not want me to find. I went back to the data, but this time, instead of looking at the numbers, I looked at the physical evidence, the estate inventory. Malcolm's firm had hired a third-party company to document the contents of the house immediately after Dad died. They had taken thousands of photos, every room, every drawer, every shelf. It was a digital archive of a life that had just ended. I sat at the dining table with my laptop, scrolling through the images, kitchen, living room, study. I was looking for the notebook. Kendra claimed it was trash. Vaughn claimed he archived it, but Malcolm's list said it was checked out. I opened the folder for the master bedroom, Dad's nightstand. There was a photo of the nightstand surface, a lamp, a glass of water, a stack of books. I zoomed in. The books were a biography of Churchill and a thriller. I went to the next photo. This one was taken from a different angle, showing the drawer of the nightstand slightly open. I zoomed in again. There, in the gap of the open drawer, was a black corner. It was blurry, out of focus because the camera was focused on the lamp. But I recognized the texture. It was the pebbled leather of a moleskin notebook, and catching the light was the faint silver glint of the elastic band's metal clasp. I stared at the screen. The photo was dated the day after Dad died. The timestamp was 10 in the morning. Kendra had said she threw it out because it was trash, but if it was in the nightstand drawer, tucked away, it wasn't trash. It was kept close, and if Vaughn signed for it later that day, he didn't pull it out of a garbage bag. He took it from the nightstand. I called the estate coordinator at Calder and Wren. A woman named Emily answered. Emily, this is Naomi Cook. I need a copy of the chain of custody form for item 402. I have that on file, she said. I can email it to you. I waited, tapping my fingers on the table. The email arrived 2 minutes later. I opened the PDF. It was the same form Malcolm had shown me. But this was the high-resolution scan. I could read the fine print. I could read the handwritten notes in the margins. Item 402. Personal journal. Release to Vaughn Hale. Reason for removal. And there, in Vaughn's handwriting, spiky, aggressive loops were the words, temporarily for safekeeping pending family review. I forwarded it to Eden. She called me back instantly. Safekeeping, Eden muttered. No one does that for a notebook. Naomi, you take jewelry for safekeeping. You take cash. You do not take a used notebook for safekeeping unless you think the contents are dangerous. He signed it, I said. He admitted he took it to keep it safe. Safe from whom, Eden asked. Safe from the trustee. Safe from you, that note proves intent. He didn't take it as a keepsake. He took it to control it. So I have him. You have leverage, Eden said. He is holding estate property that he claimed was for review. The review period for personal effects is usually 48 hours. It has been weeks. Demand it back. I am going to meet him. I said, not at the house, Eden warned. No, neutral ground. I texted Vaughn. I need to clarify a detail about the estate tax filing regarding the personal effects. Meet me at the Riverwalk Park in 1 hour, alone. It was a public place, open, visible. I drove there with Serena. She waited in the car, watching from the parking lot with her phone ready to record if things went sideways. I walked to the bench overlooking the river. The water was high, swollen with the recent rain. Vaughn was already there. He was wearing sunglasses. Though it wasn't particularly bright, he looked polished, but there was a tension in his jaw that marred the image. Naomi, he said, not standing up. I thought we were done talking until you signed the papers. I sat on the other end of the bench. I'm not signing anything. Vaughn, not yet. He sighed. You are dragging this out. You are hurting Kendra. I ignored that. I want the notebook. Vaughn. He turned his head slowly to look at me. The sunglasses hid his eyes, which made him harder to read. What notebook? Item 402. I recited. The one you signed for on November 5th. The one you wrote was for safekeeping. He gave a short, dismissive laugh. Oh, that. I turned that over weeks ago. To whom I asked. It is not in the inventory. Malcolm doesn't have it. I gave it to Kendra. He lied, smoothly, without a beat. She probably misplaced it. She is a mess right now. Naomi, you know how she gets. Stop lying, I said. My voice was steady. I saw the photo log. I saw the chain of custody. You took it, and I know why. He took off his sunglasses. His eyes were bloodshot. Dark circles bruised the skin beneath them. You don't know anything, he said softly. I know about VH Holdings, Vaughn. I know about the Caymans. I know about the sports books. His face went still. The charm vanished. The mask of the grieving son-in-law dissolved, revealing something cold and sharp underneath. You have been busy, he said. I know you are desperate. I know you need the trust to unlock so you can cover your debts. And I know the notebook proves that Dad knew. Vaughn turned his body toward me. He leaned in, invading my space. You think that notebook is a magic bullet, he asked. His voice was a low hiss. You think it paints your father as a saint and me as a villain? He shook his head. Your dad wrote some ugly things when he was scared. Naomi, he wrote about everyone. He wrote about Kendra's instability. He wrote about your failures. He wrote about how he was ashamed that his legacy ended with 2 women who couldn't lead a parade, let alone a company. I felt a punch in my gut. Your failures. He slipped. You read it. I said, you just said you turned it over, but you know what is in it. Vaughn smiled. It was a cruel, tight smile. Of course I read it. I had to make sure his dementia hadn't produced anything libelous. He stood up, buttoning his coat. Here's the reality. Naomi, You can wave your little audit around all you want. But if you release that financial info, I will release the notebook. I will publish the pages where your father calls you a charity case. I will publish the pages where he questions Kendra's sanity. I will burn this family's reputation to the ground, and I will walk away with my half of the ashes." He leaned down. "Sign the papers, unfreeze the accounts, or I will let the world know what Martin Cook really thought of his daughters." He turned and walked away. I sat there, watching the river churn. He was controlling the narrative through fear. He was holding Dad's words hostage, weaponizing my own insecurity against me. But he had made a mistake. He had admitted he had it. He had admitted he read it. And he had admitted he was holding it to prevent libel. That wasn't safekeeping. That was extortion. I walked back to the car. Serena unlocked the doors. "Well," she asked. "He has it," I said, "and he's going to use it to blackmail us." I pulled out my phone. I didn't call Eden. I called Malcolm's office. I left a message with the receptionist. "This is Naomi Cook. Inform the trustee that I'm formally requesting the court appoint an independent fiduciary to recover stolen estate property. I am filing a police report for theft against Vaughn Hale tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., unless the item is returned. It was a nuclear option. Involving the police would make everything public. It would destroy the stock price. It would ruin the company. But I had to show him I was willing to burn it down too." I went home. I waited. At 8 o'clock that evening, the doorbell rang. I checked the peephole. It was Kendra. She was alone. She was wearing a trench coat over sweatpants. Her hair was wet, as if she had just stepped out of the shower and walked straight here. I opened the door. She stepped inside. She was shaking, visibly vibrating with tremors that started in her hands and traveled up her arms. "He told me," she whispered. "Told you what I asked." Locking the door, "He told me you are going to the police." I led her to the living room. Serena was there, reading a book. She stood up, took one look at Kendra, and went to the kitchen to make tea. Kendra, I am done playing his game." Kendra collapsed onto the sofa. "You can't. If you go to the police, they will arrest him." "Good," I said. "He embezzled millions." "Kendra, if they arrest him..." Kendra's voice broke. "Naomi, he promised me security. He told me the loan was to set us up for life. He said Dad was cutting us off. He said the trust was a trap to leave us with nothing. He lied." I sat down next to her. I didn't hug her. I just sat close enough that she could feel I was there. I signed papers. Kendra confessed. Tears were streaming down her face now. Angry, hot tears. Months ago. He brought them to me in bed. He said it was just company paperwork. Routine compliance. I didn't read them. I just signed. "What did you sign, I think?" "I think I signed over my power of attorney. I think I signed personal guarantees for his debts." She looked at me, her eyes wide with horror. "If he goes down, I go down. I lose the house. I lose my shares. I lose everything." I realized then how deep the trap was. Vaughn had tethered himself to her so tightly that she couldn't cut him loose without bleeding out herself. I took a deep breath. "Kendra," I asked, the question that had been haunting me since the video, "did Dad tell you he was scared Kendra stopped crying?" She sniffed, wiping her nose with her sleeve. She looked at the floor. "Once," she whispered, "about a week before the heart attack, he came to my house. He looked gray. What did he say? He asked me if I was happy. That's all. He just asked. 'Kendra, are you happy?' And I said yes. Because what else do you say?" And he looked at me so sadly. She swallowed hard. He said, "I can't stop the train. Kendra, the brakes are cut. Time is the only weapon left. Time is the only weapon left. The watch, the schedule, the deadlines." Dad knew he couldn't fire Vaughn without destroying Kendra. He knew he couldn't sue him without ruining the family, so he built a machine that used time to force the truth into the light. He built a pressure cooker. "We are not going to the police," I said. "Not tomorrow." Kendra looked up. "We aren't?" "No," I said. We are going to let the clock run out. We are going to let Vaughn think he has won. Right up until the second he loses. My phone chimed. I picked it up. It was a text message. From Malcolm Wren. Tomorrow at 9:17. Be present. Wear something with a pocket. I stared at the screen. The timed trigger. It was happening again. Malcolm knew. He knew we were at the breaking point. I showed the text to Kendra. What does it mean? She asked. I stood up. It means Dad isn't done speaking yet. I looked at Serena, who was bringing in the tea. Get some sleep. I told them both. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. I walked to the window and looked out at the darkness. Somewhere out there, Vaughn was probably drinking scotch and thinking he had checkmated me with his threat about the notebook. He didn't know that the notebook wasn't the weapon. The time was the weapon, and it was 9:17 somewhere. I touched the pocket of my blazer. Wear something with a pocket. I didn't know what was coming, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the ticking clock. I was waiting for the alarm. The morning of the final meeting, the sky over Briar Glen was a hard, brilliant blue. The rain had washed away the last of the autumn haze, leaving the world sharp-edged and unforgiving. I parked my rental car in the lot of Calder and Wren at 8:30. I checked my reflection in the visor mirror. I wasn't the same woman who had sat here a month ago, trembling at the thought of confrontation. My face looked thinner, my eyes darker, but there was a set to my jaw that belonged to Martin Cook. I walked into the lobby. The receptionist nodded to me, a shift from the polite indifference of my first visit. She knew, in a town this size, everyone knew something was happening. Malcolm Wren was waiting for me in the hallway outside the conference room. He wasn't looking at his watch. He was looking at me. Ms. Cook, he said. His voice was softer than I had ever heard it, almost grandfatherly. Good morning, Malcolm. He gestured to the door. Do you have a pen? I patted my blazer pocket. Yes. Is your phone charged? The voice recorder app is ready. I nodded. It is running now. Good, Malcolm said. He straightened his cuffs. We proceed exactly on time. We entered the room. The setup was identical to the reading, but the energy was different. Kendra and Vaughn were already seated. Vaughn was leaning back in his chair, one arm draped over the back, projecting an air of relaxed dominance. But as I took my seat, I saw his leg under the table. His knee was bouncing up and down, a rapid-fire jitter that shook the water glass in front of him. He wasn't relaxed. He was vibrating. Kendra sat next to him, staring at her hands. She looked pale, waxen. She didn't look up when I entered. The Northline attorneys, Davis Thorne and his junior associate, were arranging papers in precise stacks. Thorne looked annoyed, like a man who had better places to be than a provincial trust dispute. Malcolm took his seat at the head of the table. He placed a single object in front of him, a sealed courier pouch, gray plastic, stamped with the logo of a secure vault service in Boston. He looked at the clock on the wall. It was 9:10. He folded his hands. We will wait. The silence in the room was excruciating. Vaughn checked his phone 3 times. Thorne sighed audibly. Kendra didn't move. At 9:15, Vaughn snapped. Can we get on with this? We have been here for a month of delays. We know the audit is done. Just tell us the accounts are unlocked so we can get back to work. Malcolm did not answer. He watched the second hand on the wall clock. Mr. Wren, Thorne added, his voice dripping with condescension. This theatricality is bordering on professional misconduct. My clients have business to attend to. The audit has concluded, Malcolm said, his eyes still on the clock, and it found material inconsistencies in vendor payments tied to the trust assets. Specifically, payments to entities controlled by undisclosed parties. Vaughn's knee stopped bouncing. He froze. That is an interpretation. Thorne said quickly, operational expenses are often complex. Furthermore, Malcolm continued, ignoring him, interference with protected estate property has occurred. An item listed on the inventory was removed from the premises under false pretenses. Vaughn scoffed. A nervous barking sound. You mean the notebook, the one Naomi is obsessed with? I told you. Kendra lost it. It is a non-issue. It is worth $2 at a stationery store. It is worth considerably more than that, Malcolm said. The clock ticked. 9:16. Malcolm reached for the courier pouch. Due to the confirmed interference, the Trust's second-timed addendum is now active. He picked up a letter opener. At 9:17 exactly, a soft beep emitted from his wrist. He sliced the pouch open. The sound of the plastic tearing was the loudest thing in the world. He reached inside and pulled out a clear evidence sleeve. Inside was a black moleskin notebook. But it wasn't the battered one I remembered. It wasn't the one Vaughn had taken. This one looked new, pristine. Vaughn stared at it. "That is not," he started, then stopped himself. Malcolm placed the bagged notebook on the table. "Your father was a man of contingencies, Mr. Hale," Malcolm said. He anticipated that his personal journals might be compromised, so he kept two. I felt a jolt of electricity go up my spine. 2 notebooks. One was a decoy, Malcolm explained, a place where he vented his frustrations, his emotional outbursts. "That is the one you removed from the nightstand, Mr. Hale, the one you believed contained leverage." Vaughn's face went gray. "This," Malcolm tapped the evidence bag, "is the true ledger. It was kept in a safe deposit box in Boston. It contains dates, signatures, meeting notes, and explicit instructions regarding the governance of Cookridge packaging." Vaughn looked like he was going to be sick. He looked at Kendra, then back at the notebook. Malcolm opened the bag. He took out the notebook with gloved hands. He opened it to a page marked with a yellow tab. "I will read a relevant entry, dated August 14th. Meeting with T. Brenner. Confirmed suspicion regarding V2H. Loans are not for expansion. Capital is being diverted to offshore holding," confronted Kendra. "She is terrified. Says she signed spousal consent, thinking it was routine. She is being used as a shield." Malcolm looked up. It continues. "I cannot fire him without exposing her liability. I cannot sue him without destroying the family name. So I must freeze him. I will lock the shares. I will force the clock to run out on his debts. If he is desperate, he will make a mistake. He will try to steal the narrative. He will try to steal the journal." Malcolm closed the notebook. He stole the wrong one. The room was silent. Vaughn sat there, his mouth slightly open, the air rushing out of him like a punctured tire. The arrogant, controlling man who had threatened me in the park was gone. In his place was a small, frightened gambler who had bet everything on a bluff and lost. Kendra made a sound. It was a low, keening noise, like an animal in pain. She put her head on the table and began to sob. Not the angry tears from before. These were deep, racking sobs of total collapse. "I thought I was saving us," she whispered into the wood. "I thought I was saving the house." I looked at her, and the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The Leech accusation. It wasn't because she thought I was greedy. It was projection. She was the one draining the family, unknowingly at first, and then out of desperation. She was terrified that if I looked too closely, if I opened the books, I would see the rot she had allowed to spread. She attacked me to keep me away, to keep me from seeing that she was the victim, not the villain. I reached across the table. I didn't touch her, but I put my hand near hers. "Kendra," I said softly, "it is over." She didn't look up. She just cried harder. "Mr. Thorne stood up. "Mr. Wren, this is highly irregular. We need to recess. We need to review this so-called ledger for authenticity." "Sit down, Mr. Thorne," Malcolm said. His voice was like a whip crack. The lawyer sat. "The documents are held under fiduciary privilege," Malcolm said. "And as of 9 o'clock this morning, I have filed an emergency petition with the probate court." He looked at Vaughn. "To restrict Vaughn Hale's access to any and all trust-related accounts, corporate premises, and spousal assets pending a criminal investigation into embezzlement and fraud." Vaughn surged to his feet. "You can't do that." "That is my company. It is the Trust's company," Malcolm said calmly, "and the trust is now under the sole discretion of the co-protector." He turned to me, Naomi. I looked at him. The room felt blurry. "Your father left a final structure," Malcolm said. "A choice. He laid 2 documents on the table. Option A. He said, "You maintain the freeze. You refer the findings of the audit, including this ledger, to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the district attorney. We prosecute. The company will likely face a regulatory shutdown. The stock will collapse. The foundation will lose its funding source. But justice will be absolute." He pointed to the second document. Option B. You execute a controlled restructuring. We remove the current board, specifically Mr. Hale. We appoint an independent CEO. We negotiate a repayment plan for the debts using the personal estate assets, effectively liquidating Kendra's inheritance to cover the whole. The company survives. The employees keep their jobs. The foundation continues. But I asked, "But Mr. Hale walks away from the criminal charges." Malcolm said, "He leaves with nothing, but he leaves free, to protect the company from the scandal of a trial." I looked at the papers. Justice, or stability. I looked at Vaughn. He was staring at me with naked fear. He knew I held his life in my hands. I looked at Kendra. She was broken. If I chose option A, she would be dragged through a public trial. Her humiliation would be national news. She would lose everything she had tried so desperately to protect. I looked at the notebook. Time is the only weapon left. Dad hadn't built this to destroy Vaughn. He had built it to save the company, to save the 500 families like Frank Gorski's, to save the foundation that bought furnaces for strangers, and maybe, just maybe, to save Kendra from herself. I stood up. My legs felt solid. I wasn't shaking. I looked at my watch. It was 9:25. I looked at Malcolm. "We protect the company," I said. Vaughn let out a breath, a sound of immense relief. "But," I added, turning to face Vaughn directly, "there are conditions." Vaughn nodded eagerly. "Anything. Naomi, anything. You resign. Effective immediately. You sign a full confession of the embezzlement to be held in escrow by the trust. If you ever come near the company, or the family, or Kendra again, we release it to the DA." Vaughn paled. I continued, my voice hard as iron. "You return the other notebook. Today." He nodded. Yes, of course." I turned to Kendra. "Kendra, look at me." She lifted her head. Her face was ravaged. "I am not a leech," I said. She shook her head. No, you are not. And you are not a victim anymore." I said, "You are going to help me fix this. You are going to work. You are going to earn back every cent he stole." She nodded slowly. "Okay." I turned to Malcolm. "I choose option B, but with the stipulation that the co-protector role becomes permanent until the debt is repaid." Malcolm smiled. A genuine smile this time. Agreed. I picked up the pen. I signed the document. Naomi Cook. I put the pen down. I looked at the room. The lawyers were packing up. Defeated. Vaughn was a ghost of a man. Kendra was beginning the long, painful process of putting herself back together. I walked to the window. Below, the town of Briar Glen was waking up. The factory whistle blew at the Cookridge plant, a low, mournful sound that signaled the shift change. People were going to work. They didn't know how close they had come to losing it all. They didn't know that a notebook and a watch had saved their livelihoods. I touched the glass. I wasn't going back to the city. My art was there. But my work was here. I checked my watch. It was 9:30. The time for waiting was over. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed Naomi's journey from outcast to protector, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice and family secrets. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what you would have done in Naomi's shoes. Would you have chosen justice or stability? Share your thoughts in English below. Until next time.